Tenakoto Katoa. Welcome back to the Youth Factor, where we aim to see the world through the lens of the future. I'm your host, Alex Jung, and I hope to take you on a virtual journey around the world where stories untold will be shared, current issues will be discussed, and the voices of the youth will be heard. Today, we explore a beautiful country in Asia, home to breathtaking landscapes such as the minaret of Jam and mosques with the most sensational architecture. This country has a rich history spanning over 5,000 years. The food is amazing with a delicious blend of flavors and spices, including kebabs and mantu. There's vibrant music and dance, including traditional instruments like the rubab and the atan dance, a popular dance performed at weddings and celebrations. Today, we explore Afghanistan, and joining me today is our guest host, Nargis Mael. Nargis is from Kabul and currently studying in Hong Kong. Hello, Nargis.
Hi, Alex. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the beautiful definition about my country. I would like to start off with an introduction of myself. My name is Nargis Mayo. I was born and raised in Afghanistan. I am an 18 years old to be student studying in Hong Kong, but currently living in Kabul. I live in the capital of Afghanistan, where hot news is being formed and most of the festivals were taking place. I'd like to give enough information this much about myself.
Well, I'm extremely grateful to have you on the podcast. So, we're going to get straight into the issues and topics. So, September 2021, a ban on high school education for women and girls was introduced in Afghanistan. And in December 2022, a ban on university was introduced as well. So, before 2021, Afghanistan's education system for all genders was supposedly thriving. So could you outline what education looked like before the Taliban takeover? And just to what extent is this change in policy a major blow to education as a whole in the country?
Well, the education system before the Taliban, I would not call it like the most high quality one, but it was more inclusive, like not only for genders, but ethnic minorities. It was more so of like very inclusive in terms of like there was no factor stopping girls and boys from attending schools and girls from attending higher education and universities. And also there were a lot of like it was not like more so of great quality, but day by day it was improving a lot. And a lot of programs have been just dedicated for promoting education in rural areas of Afghanistan. And a lot of organizations were funding these projects and these programs. And also we had like international schools, not in terms of like students like a boarding schools that students come and learn, but it was international in terms of the system because they were using Oxford system to educate students, and all the subjects were taught in English. So that was a great opportunity for students because the top students from those schools would be given the opportunity to have a fully funded scholarship and go study abroad in many different countries. One of them being the Turkish Afghan school that provide a lot of educations and education opportunities in university in Turkey. So that was more so of like day by day improvement of education sector in Afghanistan. And although the schools were mostly like separate for boys and girls, that was not about the gender discrimination. It was just to respect the culture, the religion of the people. After fourth grade, girls and boys would be separated, but that does not mean that girls would not be allowed to go to school. They were totally allowed. I was going to my school. And as of now that the situations have changed, it is the schools are completely closed. All the education centers are completely closed. University are completely closed. Only for girls, only for one sex, only for girls. It is closed, and definitely it is a huge shock. It is actually a fear that people are developing right now, and it has affected people not only in terms of like their hope, but also in terms of like mental issues. A lot of people have this had impact their mental health, and a lot of girls are just having depression very high in like stages of depression they're going through. So not only for the education sector that is now being only like male dominated and only like boys are allowed in it, but in terms of like people, they're just very disappointed and desperate. They're completely depressed by the situation right now in Afghanistan.
Mm. Yeah, it's definitely a very difficult situation, and coming from an outsider point of view, watching that on the news, it was a very big shock as well. To just kind of, it almost seemed like such a radical change that you wouldn't believe would happen in this day and age. And I think it's very shocking. Could I ask a little bit about then a little bit of context about what the Taliban takeover was? And just to follow up on what are the buildings being used as now then? Because you said the schools were separated by gender, so if they're completely closed down, are they just kind of abandoned buildings?
Well, like the Taliban took over was definitely made a lot of changes in terms of like um, uh, places and the buildings that you mentioned. I like that question. It is some of them are used just for Islamic purposes.
Oh,
Some of those buildings that once were education centers are the houses of people. Some are security checks, security points. Some are just taken by Taliban and are not given permission to any educational purpose.
mm,
So it is most likely like whatever they want to do with these buildings, they do with it. Um, a lot of schools that were mainly girls' schools, they are operating until sixth grade, um, but they're not operating more than that. So, for example, if there are like 3 floors for the school, only one floor is being used for like the sixth grade
oh,
students. Other than that, even the teachers are not working. The teachers of like higher education is different, and they're not working. Only there are teachers for grade 1 to grade 6, and other than that, the buildings are just free. Like my school is like 5 minutes away from me, and whenever I go inside, I can't go inside if I want to. It's just when I go with my sister or just go to ask a teacher and like follow up with them. The building is scary. It is totally empty for the classes are empty. There's only just few classes for six grades that are being used. Other than that, it's totally empty.
wow. And I think you talked a little bit about the kind of emotional toll it takes, but could you elaborate a little bit about the psychological and emotional and mental tolls this has on Afghan women? Because this is essentially cutting out education for like half of the student population.
Yeah, for that, like imagine if I tell you that Alex, you're a boy, and I don't want to talk to you right now, and
Mm,
I leave the meeting just because you're a boy. How would you feel? You
yeah.
just feel so terrified. You feel shocked. And you imagine me as not even a human being for saying that. That
Mm,
is the situation that girls and women are going through in Afghanistan. I mentioned before about the whole mental health issues with
mm,
girls. I know a lot of girls that are depressed, but I know some of them that have panic attacks like daily. And either they don't have the facilities to go to like a therapist, or there are no therapists near their house and they cannot travel far away for doing that.
mm,
So even that they affected the health sector of Afghanistan. Like a lot of people are depressed now. They have a lot of like high levels of anxiety, and also not only in terms of like mental issues, it led to a point where a lot of girls committed suicide. Actually, they did, and they're not being reported on media because it is censored. It's all censored. When the Taliban took over, right in the start, a lot of girls from their own school buildings, they just um, fell down and they committed suicide, and none of them have been reported. So you see how like the whole mental issue is affecting people in terms of like physically, and especially young innocent girls. Like it is so, if all the people would be in the same situation, it would be much like tolerable. But now that it's only girls, it makes us feel more the whole feeling of alienation. Like you feel like an alien in this country. You feel like you're told that you cannot walk on this sidewalk just because you're a girl, just because you're a woman. It happens. There is a sidewalk near my house and I cannot walk in it, but my brother can. It makes me feel like more like an alien. Like, who am I in this country? I'm
mm,
not being able to go to the gym, not to the parks, to amusement places. I'm not even able to go to school to have my basic rights. It makes all the girls feel more depressed and more desperate. And the fact that nothing has been done these days, it makes us more mentally depressed and pressured.
mm. I'm really sorry to hear that. And I think like, especially for the people listening to this podcast, since we are like youth and high school students or university students, it's kind of at that point where aspirations are really high. Like you want to, it's the point where you start wanting to do something with your life and go beyond and make change. And I think definitely really difficult to kind of visualize how difficult it is to kind of lose that kind of basic right, to have all your hopes kind of disappear in front of you. I mean, I was reading an article about like Afghan students who was taking the final year exams that year and preparing for it to go abroad to study. And then that's completely taken away from them. And now they just stumbled as to what to do. And I think when you do something as
Yeah,
this,
definitely.
it just has that big of a toll on the population. So I think the kind of
It does.
important question to ask is, why exactly are women's rights being targeted? Because you said education is a basic human right, and that should be universal. And so the big question is, what is the supposed reasoning for this ban on women's education?
Well, this question is one of those most asked questions, yet it still remains to be an answered question.
Mm,
What the Taliban answered the question, the way that they answer the question is they don't announce that we do not want education for women, but action speaks louder than words.
yeah.
Um, Actually, what they say is that they're working on a plan that includes the uniform and the dress code for girls' education, and they want a plan, an education system that is whole Islamic, like it was not ever before. And they're still working on it. And it's been more than 653 days. I've been counting it.
Mm,
It's nearly 2 years that these girls are not going to school just because of a uniform. So you see how like idiotic that is. It's
yeah.
not a reason that to accept it. But
Mm,
from my perspective, like I would think of it as two aspects. One is the limited budget for the education in Afghanistan. Like before the Taliban, Afghanistan was not a rich country. It was dependent on other countries' aid.
mhm.
But the thing was that there were a lot of aid happening in terms of education. A lot of programs were being funded. Although there was corruption in terms of like imaginary schools and imaginary teachers, but then there were a lot of things being done on a positive side to improve this education system. It was a lot of like women and girls were able to study abroad, to study in Afghanistan. There were a lot of facilities for them. More than thousands of schools have been built in rural areas, let alone the capital of Afghanistan. Um, so now those organizations are not working for the favor of Taliban, and they're not like supporting Taliban. That aid is finally cut off. So, in terms of in the ideology of Taliban, they are disabling a less deserving um, uh, sort of like people in Afghanistan, which are girls. For them, girls are less deserving of education. That's why they're disabling these people to receive education. But that is not the whole reason. It is actually with their mindsets, with their ideology that they have. It is with what they have in mind, because they have this grudge against women. And you know, in their language, which is very interesting, in their language, they have a saying which says which means um, women is only for house or for grave. So you
Mm,
only are belonging to house or for the grave. That is what basically their ideology is. It's so dangerous. Like the whole ideology about women is nothing and they should not be empowered. And also they are afraid of like empowered women, because if a woman is empowered and if they're educated, they know their rights, they know how to access their rights, and they're fighting for their rights.
mm,
So they're working against this ideology, which they call a democratic ideology. And they announced at the very start that they are not a democratic government. And they are not a government that is by people, for people. They're a government for religion, and they will imply all the laws of the religion, although some of them are actually made up. So the whole thing about women education is that they don't want it. They don't like women. They're male dominated government, and also their whole idea of making Afghanistan a center of terrorism. The first step for doing that is to like ban of education, especially on women. That's like the first step to do that.
mm. I mean, when you said this saying, you know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of what the Nazi Germany government was saying towards women at the time. The Kutsche, which is like the woman should only be going to church in the kitchen and making children. It just reminded me so strongly.
Definitely.
And that's very scary because the Nazi regime, keeping in mind, is 100 years ago from what is happening now. And it seems that it's almost identical in the ideology. So that's definitely
Yeah,
a turning point.
definitely.
So I believe this issue is not just about education, though. This is such a it's a broad there's broader implications to this. It's going to affect the way this patriarchy is working, and it affects the way the government runs, and it definitely will affect the economy as well. Because I mean, it's going to affect literacy rates in Afghanistan. It's definitely pretty much cutting down the education rates by half. So, what do you think are the biggest kind of effects that affect the country because of this?
Well, first of all, it's not only about the one sector of Afghanistan. It is not only about the education sector being disabled. It is a very fundamental sector of Afghanistan. And when that is being kind of sort of like disabled or only specific to one sex, to one gender, that on a whole affects the whole country. It affects the GDP of the country. There were like 20 years of work being done to promote education and fight against illiteracy. Now it's coming back. And definitely it will have an effect on the economy and the GDP of our country as a whole. And the current discrimination, it is not only an ethnic discrimination that affects an ethnic minority. It affects more than half of the population of Afghanistan. 36 plus million population, more than that, 18 million of them are affected by this rule, by this law. And this affects the whole government in a way that a government that more than half of its people are not part of it will not be successful. And about the illiteracy rate, imagine that a religious leader with zero law background is hired in the position of a Supreme Court judge. How would you think that judge would judge, actually? So that's happening right now in Afghanistan. Like they are taking over the positions that they do not even know what that means. And on the other side, like the people who are educated and they have received the education and they are eligible just because of their background in working with previous government, and just because of their ethnicity, they're sitting in the house, and some of them are being actually tortured. So this affects the whole the balance of the country. And also Taliban are faced with the world that is more educated. Even their partners, Pakistan, in their parliamentary, they have a women working, where these people are just excluding women from everything. And they have been asked this question more and more, and they did not answer any of these questions of this sort. So the whole balance in the country, even the fight against other countries or representing Afghanistan is more of now of a nation that is more illiterate, and it will affect their own government in terms of like standing out in other part of the globe, but also in terms of like the GDP and the economy runs, and how people are affected by the illiteracy rate.
So I think the next question is probably the trickiest question to ask, because this is obviously a very big problem, but we got to work towards solving it. There's got to be some solution. So what do you think needs to be done immediately? And how feasible is this? And if there is anything, what is currently being done?
Well, in terms of that, in terms of what needs to be done, there's a lot actually, even for the purpose of compensation as well. But compensation and what has been done, or what you have asked about what has been done, nothing.
Yeah.
Actually, nothing. And it is so obvious. What needs to be done in this situation, like right immediately, the international community should have its own pressures on Taliban. They should not let Taliban imply whatever they wish with the country and turn Afghanistan into a whole terrorist base, and do their attacks internationally and universally on others. They should put pressure on Taliban for not abiding by the rules, international laws. They should put pressure on them for neglecting human rights, like so obviously in Afghanistan. Afghan girls need to be free, and they should not be played as a game between the politics that is going on. They should be free of hostage and access their own education. Like what I was thinking of this question is online education systems for Afghan girls, or even more opportunities for Afghan girls to study abroad. These are the things that needs to be done as a compensation, because girls actually no people, no one in Afghanistan, but girls in specific should not be in hostage, and they should not be used as a weapon against the international community and the other countries to recognize Taliban. So what right needs to be done is like to imply human rights, like put pressure on Taliban to not neglect human rights and to consider them, and provide the population with their own very basic rights. And also, I would like to mention about the funding, any foreign intervention that is happening, funding the organizations that are working either towards education, educating Afghan girls, or facilitating working from home for women in Afghanistan, because it as a whole affects the whole poverty situation and stuff. So I think like these are the small steps, but the very necessary ones that need to be taken. Because if it goes a long way, it's been almost like 2 years that girls, that the very basic human right is being neglected and the world does nothing. And it's absolutely horrifying. So this is the small steps that need to be taken in terms of like education, but in other ways, there are a lot to be done, which yet haven't been done.
Yeah, and the next topic of discussion will be talking about the Taliban's kind of like fight to become a sovereign state, and how the international community does have like played quite a large role in preventing them from becoming a legitimate state. Because if that, when they start getting accepted by other countries as legitimate, it's going to get much, much worse. So I wanted to ask a bit of a personal question, because you're currently studying abroad. After your current education, do you have any plans on where you will go next, or any future plans in general?
I wish I would answer this question in a way that I would come back to my home country, but I am of no use here. And the current situation does not even give me like my very basic rights, and it considers me as nothing, to stay home or belong to the grave. So that's why even my parents are not they do not agree with me coming back to Afghanistan, because there are literally no opportunities. But I will serve my country in a way that I will educate myself, and I will work on educating other people. And I'm leaning more towards of like, as this education whole in abroad in HK was just a whole different thing for me, and it made a lot of huge impacts in my life and my perspective. I want to continue my education abroad, especially in those countries that are providing more financial aid and student loans. So I'm leaning more to those countries, and definitely want to continue with my journey studying abroad.
Mm. And I really hope that within the next 10 years, that more Afghan women and girls can actually study abroad and have these opportunities. And yeah, let's just hope that day comes sooner than later. Um,
Same.
so we're going to move on to our second point of discussion, which is about the Taliban's demand to be recognized as a regime. So could you please contextualize how the Taliban came into power in 2021? And what are the biggest implications of this? So you've already talked about one implication, which is the ban on girls' education, but what are some other major implications?
Well, Taliban coming over or fighting for authority in Afghanistan was not a new thing that happened in the 2 3 years. Once they were forced by U.S. troops in 2001 to withdraw the country, they aim to come back to Afghanistan, and that was like the whole topic or discussion or the reason of 20-year war in Afghanistan. They wanted to take authority back in Afghanistan, and make this nation a whole terrorist base. And those fights being done in a completely a 20-year war in Afghanistan led to a point that I would like to say in the last decade, they had unofficially pardoned the government, in a way that they had a lot of negotiations with the presidents, two of them actually, Karzai and Ashraf Ghani. And these negotiations, some of them failed, but some of them led to a point that President Ashraf Ghani was given an offer by the Taliban to split the government, 60-40 or 50-50% government for both sides. And they wanted for peace and ceasefire, they wanted the government, the president of the government, to resign from some sectors. For example, the security sector of Afghanistan, they wanted to resign from him from that and completely leave it in the hands of Taliban, which would be a way for peace and ceasefire. But this offer was completely rejected because it was not in the favor of the president. But somehow, when this offer was rejected, they unofficially, with their fights and wars, they unofficially took over some of the provinces in Afghanistan. Yet not the capital, because it was more so of like more security, but the other provinces of Afghanistan were taken over by them. And by that time, the Doha Agreement happened, and which was an initiative to end the 20-year war in Afghanistan, which failed. But in that, more than 5,000 prisoners of Taliban were released as per the conditions of the agreement. And that gave them more like a political power and more so of like physical power in terms of like the body of their people. So these facilitated them taking over the Afghanistan a little bit. However, in 15th of August 2021, when they officially took over the capital in the whole Afghanistan, what was the reason for that was the U.S. troops withdrawal. Like when they withdraw from the country, it was a sort of a battle that they didn't have to fight for. And also the resigning of president and his escape from the country made the situation, like changed the situation completely, turned everything over, and facilitated the takeover or the rise of Taliban in Afghanistan. It was a very empty field that they entered, and they took over the country. No security, no one to fight for the nation and for the authority in the nation. So it is more so of like how they came into power in 2021, which I totally remember every little detail. It's just a long story, but I kind of like summarized it. And the implications, like once I talked about the gender discrimination, the sex discrimination, ethnic discrimination, ban of human rights. Like you don't have your own basic rights in Afghanistan. Afghanistan is like the second North Korea here. And no one knows about it, because why would they know? How would they know if there are no media reports, and all the media reports are censored and they're made for the favor of Taliban, not against the Taliban and not the truth. So these are the major implications of them taking over the Afghanistan.
Thank you for sharing. So I wanted to ask a little bit about the ideology behind the Taliban and how they operate. And what separates a terrorist organization and a political party, because I think it's safe to say that the Taliban is not a political party. They don't govern in the way that a normal political party should be running. I would very much argue that they are a terrorist organization in this context. So what separates the two, in your opinion? And what part of their ideology pushes them from legitimate government to just pure terrorism?
What formed them in 1994 was their dangerous ideas. Their religious base, which is just a misuse of the name, it was their terroristic ideas in the name or the misuse of religion and the power of religion that kind of like formed these people. And in this situation, like in terms of like logic, if you observe them, segregating them from a political party or political authority is totally easy. And there is a lot of justifications to call them just a terrorist organization, just a terrorist group in Afghanistan taking power. So starting up by trampling the international law, also following up with not abiding by their pledges to respect human rights, to not execute people, and to forgive all of the things and work for people, be a government that is by people for people. So the other justification for them, the other reason for that is their obvious gender discrimination, their obvious sex discrimination that is depriving more than half of the population from their very basic rights. And they're accepting no foreign intervention to let that right be implied and give that right to the people. Plus the severity in their beliefs and their actions, like day by day, they're publishing new laws. There is a law in Afghanistan that a groom and bride cannot see each other until they're married. In their house, they have to see each other for the first time. For example, these are the very terroristic ideas. And also the gender discrimination that they're doing, the sort of vision that they had towards women, which I mentioned before, that they do not even consider women to be part of their government. And there's absolutely zero female workers with them. It's only male dominated, and it's only one ethnicity that is working with them, which are Pashtuns, which is the majority population of Afghanistan, or in terms of like tribes. And they have completely turned a blind eye into all human rights, and the increased rates of poverty shows that they are not a government. They're just sort of a group that are working for their own interests and are doing anything basically to reach those goals. And the ignorance of freedom of speech, like censoring media, taking half the population for hostage to be recognized. The ethnic discrimination that I would like to mention, the recent genocide that happened in 2022 against an ethnic minority called Hazara, and killed thousands of Hazaras for no reason. And also their dangerous action of security checks in their house. If you're from an ethnic minority, the Taliban groups will come to your house without any permission. They would do anything in your house in the name of security checks. And there is actually nothing stopping them, because they're the only power in the country are them. So these are the sort of things that are separating them from a political party or a government that is working for people. They're just a terrorist group that are taking their steps and publishing new laws to make this nation sort of like a terrorist fulfilled to further do their attacks and gain their goals and reach their goals. And also, I would like to mention about the gender discrimination. Although by the international community is not a crime, known as a crime, but in this situation that they're depriving more than half of the population from their basic rights, it is indeed a very big crime that they are doing against human rights. Definitely. And that is what separates them from a political party.
Thank you, Nargis. So what crimes against humanity should the Taliban be held accountable for? And who are the key figures that need to be stopped, or the ones being taken to the ICC, the International Criminal Court?
In my opinion, it is mostly like all of their actions needs to be questioned, and they have to be accountable for all of their actions, because 90% of them are just against the human rights. And as I previously shortly mentioned, that they have neglected human rights. Sex discrimination is happening, ethnic discrimination is happening. They're depriving half of the population from their basic rights. The genocide that they did in 2022 that the people of Afghanistan will never forget, and it was against an ethnic minority. And also they have, what I forgot to mention was the execution of people. That includes journalists and civil activists, but is not limited to them. They've executed a lot of people from ethnic minorities for different reasons, without any justification, without any further investigation, just that they found the proof of them working with the previous government. And my family, my father, being one of those people that is in threat, we have to be really careful about what we say, what we do in public. Even if we meet some of them, we have to interact them with their own language, which is the second language of Afghanistan, soon to be the first language of Afghanistan, Pashto. We cannot speak Persian or Dari with them. So it's better to just talk with them in the second language. So that's like how severe the situation is. It goes back to the executing people and without any further investigation, bombarding a lot of organizations, bombarding a lot of people, like terrorizing people, journalists especially, and politicians, and giving them many warnings about working with the previous government, and not giving them any rights to the current government, while they said it was to be a very inclusive government, which is actually not. It is very exclusive to one ethnic group in Afghanistan, which are Pashtuns. And these are the crimes that for now they have to be questioned, but not forgetting the 20-year war that they have fought, and the explosions they did and the people they killed without any reasons, and the biggest bombers that they did, they have to be accountable for all the blood they shed and all the innocent blood that they shed. And for the people who have to be questioned, it's basically their leaders. Even some of their soldiers, they're just brainwashed. Like the people who are working with them are totally brainwashed, and they do not even know what are they doing these for, and they just do it in the name of religion. But the key figures are their leaders, not only the ones in Afghanistan, is including our invisible, I would like to call it, leader. Our leader is invisible. We do not see his face. We do not see his presence. We don't even know if he's alive or not, but there's his name, and we have to accept that we have a leader. Those leaders, not in Afghanistan, but also that are living in Pakistan, and the people who are getting the order from Pakistan, they have to be held accountable for all of their actions and all of the dehumanizing actions that they have done for the past 20 years.
Mm. And so this is on like a more of an international scale, and I think you've answered a little bit of the next question, but how is this affecting more on a local scale, the community and your daily life in Afghanistan?
So daily life in Afghanistan is not the normal type. Like you go out and you only see male, and you only see like men walking around, and there is like dress codes, like really strict dress codes for women, and even the Taliban are like meddling in people's lives in a way that they are determining on what festival what should you eat. You can't eat anything else. Like there was this not sort of like festival, but it was like a happiness event. It was called Eid, and we were celebrating it as a like Islamic culture thing. And there were only two things inside the house is allowed: dates and candies that people need to have on their when you treat guests. Like they're meddling in people's lives. If you neglect that law, and if you don't care about it, you're being executed, and there's no one stopping them from doing that. So you have to abide by all their rules, although they do not abide by any international laws or any rules upon them. So that the basic the daily life in Afghanistan is like wholly depressing. The women and girls are just excluded from everything, and day by day more rules are being published. Once they say that girls cannot go to school, and then the other day they say there is no gym for girls and women, and they cannot enter parks. They cannot, and just by yesterday, this rule was published that beauty salons for men and women, especially for women, are closed. Like you can't wear makeup in this country because it is a crime. And if you neglect it, you know what the deal is. You're going to be executed by Taliban. So that's like how severe the situation on daily life is. And the poverty levels, the depression levels are just, they're reaching their peaks. It's absolutely like horrifying in the situation.
So currently they're not recognized as a regime by most countries around the world, and I'm glad that that is the situation. However, I don't believe this is enough that the international community can do at this stage. So should there be foreign intervention involved, or what is the responsibility of the international community at this stage?
The international community has to compensate a lot of things, because it was sort of like putting the Afghan nation in the hands of terrorists. So they have to do something. About the foreign interventions and them not being recognized, the people of Afghanistan, the nation, does not want them to be recognized, because it would mean that you recognize a terrorist group to rule on a country, and you're helping them as well. It's more like giving them a hand in that. We do not want them to be recognized. However, we do not deny any foreign interventions as well. But there are certain like conditions that needs to be happen. Like interventions for the purpose of correcting Taliban, for purpose of pressuring them, for purpose of implying human rights, for the purpose of empowering Afghan nation, which are totally separate from the Taliban group. These interventions should be happening. They should compensate by doing online educations, by empowering Afghan girls, giving more opportunities for them and for the whole Afghan nation as a whole. And these interventions should happen to question Taliban, to further inhibit them and stop them from doing dehumanizing actions and neglecting human rights. But if these interventions are happening in terms of like empowering Taliban, that is obviously not going to happen, and it should not happen. That's what like the people of Afghanistan are against. So any active like foreign interventions in Afghanistan that is for the purpose of like empowering Taliban should not happen. But any interventions that are being prevented because of Taliban should not affect the nation of Afghanistan. For example, the whole humanitarian aid should happen because people of Afghanistan are in need of that. But if they want to recognize, there was this talk about recognize of like UNICEF recognizing Afghanistan or Taliban as a government, that is not, it's only for the purpose of Taliban, and it helps them more to just turn this place as a terrorist base and do whatever they wish with it. So these interventions should happen for the favor of the nation of Afghanistan, for the people who are in need of it, but not in a way that benefits Taliban.
Thank you so much for sharing on that topic. And I think there's definitely more to learn about, but I think you've given a very nice comprehensive overview of what the issue is regarding this new kind of authoritarian regime. So we're going to move on to our final topic, which is poverty in Afghanistan. And you've referenced it a number of times so far, but poverty affects more than 95% of the people in Afghanistan. That is probably the highest statistic I have come across. 95%. 18.9 million people experience food insecurity, and 75% of public spending is subsidized by international aid. So, what are the root causes of poverty here? And to what extent does the Taliban takeover affect this?
Well, it is indeed obvious that the poverty levels were somehow high, even before the Taliban. But the fact that there were organizations and the situation was improving day by day. There were a lot of organizations being funded for humanitarian aid and a lot of other sectors and creating more job opportunities. The more the organizations would come to Afghanistan to run a project, the more job opportunities would be created, and that sort of like balanced out. Although there was like food insecurity and poverty like seen on some levels, but then it was kind of like sort of balanced out at some point. But the Taliban takeover meant that all of these organizations are closed. So first comes like the joblessness, like no one has any unemployment. There's no jobs currently in this situation. And also their restrictions, like they're not only they're preventing and blocking any other help from other countries, but also their restrictions on women, like and the whole nation on working, the situation, the segregating. Like there are these organizations that are working, still operating, but there are several like separate days. For example, odd days are for men, and even days are for women. So how you see how like it kind of like ruins the balance of the whole organizations. But when the Taliban took over, they blocked all of these humanitarian aid, the organizations, the funds, because they're not being recognized, and no one is helping them and giving them a hand in terms of like financially. And also, they were the reason for the frozen money of Afghanistan. Like, the US was able to freeze the money of Afghanistan, which is like $7 billion, if I'm not mistaken. And also, they worsened the situation by like they worsened the situation in a way that they blocked any help, and now they're even themselves are not in a way like able to help themselves financially. So even they themselves are facing a lot of troubles and problems in terms of financially, and the whole situation with the currency exchange and then the money. It was like $1 was 40 Afghanis, 30
Mm,
basically, but then it went to like 110. You can see
yeah.
how like the difference, one USD dollar, it is so different, especially when they knew took over. Now it is around like 90 or 100 Afghanis, only one US dollar. So like the whole currency and the exchange rate, it is absolutely like that they affected the poverty levels in a way that they blocked any help, and the only source that the positive Afghanistan that they had is basically frozen now, and they're not recognized as a government to be able to get that right back. So that's how they worsened the situation.
Thank you very much for that. So, what does poverty look like in Afghanistan? And how does this differ from other countries' definition of what poverty is? Because I'm assuming that if 95% of the population is kind of experiencing the same thing, the kind of standard for what is poverty and what isn't is probably going to look a little different.
Well, in the previous government, it was really different. Like a
Mm,
person who is um, financially unstable was really different than a person who is financially stable.
mhm,
Now the only difference for people, like in terms of monetary poverty, is that the people, for example, us, that have that are financially stable in some terms, they are just having 3 meals per day, and the people do not have, they're only having 1 meal per day, or God knows 1 meal per week. So this is how the severe the situation is. And poverty in the last previous government or in other countries is in a way that like you have less food subsidies or less food supplies or food insecurity. But in Afghanistan, people are selling their organs, people are selling their kids to gain a little bit of money to like um, uh, resolve the whole situation in the household and fight against this whole poverty. But also there is another type of poverty that exists in Afghanistan, which affects the monetary poverty. It is, I would like to say, the intellectual poverty, like the whole ideology behind the Taliban and their laws, their um, rules that they established, their beliefs. For example, establishing the rule on the ban of women employment, they have just disabled more than half of the population who were breadwinners, who their husbands died in the 20-year war between US and Afghanistan and Taliban, and now they're the breadwinners. So they have stopped them from receiving any sort of like resource to fight against poverty. So that's how like they worsen the situation, and that intellectual poverty that they have affects the monetary because they are stopping and inhibiting more and more opportunities for people of Afghanistan to like supply themselves or at least have like 3 meals per day. So I think I hope that answered the question, but that there are like two types of poverty that are sort of affecting each other in Afghanistan, besides the food insecurity.
mm. So, are there any services or measures that help to alleviate those poverty rates then? And are those services doing enough?
For alleviation, like to alleviate poverty in Afghanistan, and the Afghan nation needs a government at first place that is fully committed to be by people for people and to serve the people. Which right now we both know that we don't, that Afghanistan doesn't have that government, and it's just a group of people who are implying their ideas. But in terms of like what services, there aren't services done, neither by other countries or international community or the people in Afghanistan and the Taliban themselves. The only thing that they did in terms of like rates was there were higher rates in the market, and they determined prices for each good and each supply, and that's like that is a very old way of controlling the rates, and it's only on one aspect that is controlling the rates. It does not do anything with people's like way of finding resources and supplying themselves. And that is the only thing in the whole 2 years that they have done. But obviously, what people are in need of is the humanitarian aid at this point, because it is affecting more than 95% of people, and a lot of people are suffering from that, and they do not even have like proper meals in their house. So it's basically the humanitarian aid and the basic human supply that they need for now. But in the long term, if you look at that, they need like jobs, secure jobs, or at least less restrictions on working, so that they can earn money in what ways or another. And also the less restrictions in terms of like traveling abroad to work. A lot of young people are now leaning towards like Pakistan or Iran to work and send money to their families, because that's the only way. But there are a lot of restrictions, not only by these governments, because they are not like having any interventions with Taliban or any relations, but the Taliban themselves have a lot of restrictions. For example, if you want to go to these countries, you need a passport, but they don't grant you a passport for going there. So that causes in a lot of sort of like illegal ways to go to these countries, or paying a lot of money to these people as to get your own passport and to be able to travel in another country and work there for only domestic purposes. So it's just absolutely their restrictions as well. There needs to be like pressure on their restrictions on working, and also the humanitarian aid should not be banned just because of Taliban.
Thank you so much for sharing on the poverty issue. I have one final question, and I want to ask this because I repeat this in every episode I do, that when we talk about political issues, we're not saying the country itself is bad. And I think that Afghanistan in particular is often represented in global media as a country with only war and only tragedy and only hardships. But I think realistically speaking, the reason why these problems happen is because of a small subset of people that are causing all these issues, and that Afghanistan in general is a very beautiful and wonderful country. And I know that the culture is amazing as well. So if you want to just say a couple of words about how Afghanistan is often misrepresented in the media, or what actually beautiful things about the country that should be revealed and talked about that might have not been talked about as much.
Thank you so much for asking this question. I just like this question. Whenever I'm asked like about like talking politically on one aspect, I'd like to be asked about one thing about Afghanistan and culture as well. Well, as you say, the political representation of a country or how politically they struggle does not make that nation less or more beautiful. It is their culture, their beauty is a whole different topic on its own than just their political representation or how they're being represented on media. Because on media, it's only one perspective. It's only the political side that they're representing in Afghanistan. But I think in Afghanistan, in terms of like a representation, I think our culture, our food, and our people are the three main highlights that I love about Afghanistan. And that is the reason why sometimes I feel proud to be an Afghan. Shortly, just expanding on these, our culture. Okay, it goes a long way about like 5,000 years. But one thing that I love about my culture is the hospitability that we have. Like we're so hospitable and we're so loving towards our guests. Like we respect them on another level. We have the saying which says "Mehman dost khuda," which means that a guest is the friend of God. So like you're putting that on a very high position. And the fact that we love our neighbors no less than ourselves, like we love them so much. That's that feeling of like the whole feeling of love and giving towards neighbors and guests. That's what I love my culture. And the fact that I said food, that might be a little bit subjective, but we deal with a lot of flavors, a lot of chilies, a lot of good food, and we roast a lot of things, and we deal with a lot of oil. So it's not only like boiled things that we eat. So that's what I love about my food, which is more sort of like subjective. But in terms of like my people, which are part of the culture as well, but what I like about my people is they symbolize a star in a dark sky, or a tree that is has grown out of a cement. It's their bravery, it's them being strong, and how their motivation, like they're so motivated and inspired, and even in this situation, I know a lot of people that are not stepping back, like they're putting their lives in the risk, including me, to do something for their country. So I think like that's how I love about my country. And these representations, they would not be like almost like said, because the way of the political issues is more than these things. But I would never say that the political issues would block out the beauty of Afghanistan and my nation and the people that we have.
Mm. And I think the Afghan culture is absolutely beautiful. And I think that hopefully there'll come a day where all
Thank you.
these political issues die down, and what people see in Afghanistan is the beautiful sides of it, just as you would see in any developed nation as well. So
I wish so.
thank you so much for sharing. Are there any last words you'd like to say about any of the topics we discussed, or any ways you think that the youth can make an impact or difference?
Well, I want to thank you so much for like inviting me, for having this conversation. I totally had a full like hour of just expressing my own ideas and expressing my thoughts, and providing my own insight on things, which is definitely helping. And a lot of youth are not given this opportunity. And I want to thank your podcast, and I wish you good luck on your journey with the youth factor. It is absolutely an amazing thing, and I will be like number one fan of it no matter what. I will be listening to all the podcasts. You
Thank you.
are an amazing person. This podcast, I see it in a very near future. I see it really improving much, and thank you so much for this opportunity. And the whole conversation thing was lovely. The questions were just so accurate. I want to thank you for putting time and like researching everything, and not just asking random questions. These questions needed to be asked, actually. I wish you really good luck on your journey, and thank you so much for your time, effort, and questions, and everything as a whole.
Absolutely. The pleasure is all mine. So thank you once again, Nargis, for joining in this episode and representing
Thank you, Alex.
Afghanistan wonderfully. This wraps this episode up for the Youth Factor. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you look forward to the next stop of our journey, which is in Hong Kong.